So I just realized that I didn't create a full-length YouTube video on this replacement shower. So in this video, I'm going to show you through the entire process of removing a tub and a surround and installing a new one with 12 by 24 tile. And most importantly, how to go about going around the window. So be sure to use the timestamps down below because I highlight each section all the way through. So if there's something that you're really looking for, then with your help with your own project, skip ahead to that because, you know, I know that these are long and there's a lot of ads in there. And if you actually want more help, I created a course on this that highlights every step all the way through. I have all the links to all the products. I have checklists and I have support. So if you need any help, you can leave me a comment. I'm more than happy to help you out. So let's get with this video and show you how to replace a tub and shower. So this is really disappointing. So I have a crack in my tub. I installed this bathtub about 4 years ago and there was a small leak coming from here. And basically my flange, my tub flange had cracked. And then when I went to remove my actual drain assembly, the tub actually just started peeling apart right around the drain. And everything's like flexible, like right around this drain area. Like there is really no thickness. This is only like about 1/8 of an inch thick. Really poorly constructed, really disappointing. And unfortunately, there isn't any way to just repair this. We're gonna have to remove this entire tub. I have never been able to tear a tub out like that. Absolutely crazy. Yeah, so, I mean, look at that. I mean, it's just so thin. I mean, there's nothing there. It's just a little, it's basically just a liner, a glorified liner. So there was space between this and my bottom and bed. So I have concrete or mortar underneath of this. That's why that's in so well. Unbelievable. The only thing that was actually holding this tub, making it feel sturdy, was this mortar bed. It's the only nice thing I would say about it is, you know, this waffle really fills it in, but this being separate from the tub and how they have that little, you know, 1/8 inch liner, you know, that's really where the failure is, if you ask me. I mean, this idea is good. I like it, but if you only have an 1/8 inch of crap, you know, you got an 1/8 inch of crap. So, all right, let's clean this up. So I want to show you the difference between a good tub and a really bad tub, and something I've learned really the hard way in this project, and that is not to use a cheap crappy tub. So we've got two tubs here. They kind of look similar. They're both acrylic. I do like using acrylic. I think they make a lot of sense. They're easy to clean and they're lightweight, so it's easy for you to install. And then on top of that, you know, it just has all the different features. There's so many different brands out there, and it is a little less expensive than, say, a cast iron tub. Well, I shouldn't say less expensive, but it's just you have more options when it comes to acrylic. And again, the best thing about acrylic is of all the different styles and then the ease of cleaning it. So that's really why people love them. That's why I install them. It's just a matter of finding the right tub that is actually a decent quality. So this was what we installed upstairs 4 years ago. And this is called, it's a Delta tub. And as you can see, it has a neat little design. That was kind of the reason that the homeowner even checked this out. They liked that this had this little detail on it, just kind of made something a little bit unique. But when you look at the surface of it, it doesn't look like anything different than another tub. It all looks the same kind of. It has a deep soaker. It's like 19 inches deep. It has a nice smooth surface, has a little bit of a rough texture at the bottom for slip resistance. So at first glance, looks perfectly normal. Looks like a tub that you can count on. And with a name like Delta, you know, it's giving you kind of insurance that maybe it's a decent quality. But when you look at this a little bit more closely, you know, on the actual installation of this thing, you'll notice how flimsy this is. Now, you just saw me tear out the existing tub, and I could almost just kick through the skirt plate and break it. Very, very simple. I mean, it's only like maybe a 1/4 inch, 3/16 inch thick. Very flimsy. The rim, the entire flange is all flimsy. They do come with a bracket that helps hold this out. So, you know, if you were to install one of these, definitely make sure you install the bracket. And then what I really think is a problem, not necessarily for embedding it into mortar. This actual grate is great for that. It actually does its job very well, but it's separate from the actual tub. So this is kind of like a sleeve mechanism that goes over it. And what the major critical issue is between the actual drain flange and the bottom cover, you can consider it. I guess you would consider this like the mortar bed embedding flange, I guess you could call it, but they're separate. So there's a little bit of flexibility right in between the drain and this bottom support area. And if you tighten your drain tube tight, you'll crack it very easily. And just the fact that it's that thin, I think is really problematic, which is why I'm replacing it. So, you know, the durability of this is just not there. Now, you know, if I wouldn't have cracked the actual drain piece, would have this lasted? I mean, probably, I guess. But, you know, being this flimsy, it doesn't really take much to scratch it. It doesn't take much to crack it. And I just would never, ever install one of these things again. So when you take a look at a good tub, so this is a Jacuzzi tub. So Jacuzzi does make tubs that are not always having jets. They do make soaker tubs. So this has, you know, the same deepness, 19 inches, has a nice, basically textured bottom, acrylic. But you could see right off the bat with the flange that it is, you know, it has a really thick reinforced. So the reinforcement of all this fiberglass is what makes this much more sound. This is a really thick flange here. It's probably a good 1/4 inch to 5/16 of fiberglass. Everything's reinforced. You've got plywood reinforcement here. You even have these little support bars holding this together. You know, everything about it is very, very durable. I mean, you know, the flange doesn't move around. Now, granted, this out coating here is the same thickness as the Delta, but just the fact that it's all supported well and you have this fiberglass mesh makes this a much, much better tub. Wow. That thing was bowed as hell out of there, wasn't it? It's gonna have to get a straight edge on that tile. All right, so this job just keeps getting better and better. So one thing with these old homes, this is old plaster walls, or a combination of plaster and drywall. So we have a lot wider opening, and I already knew this because the other tub I remembered being much wider. So we got like 61.5 inches. Our tub's only 60 inches. So we're gonna have to shim out the walls. And the other thing is that Delta tub had a weird kind of bellowed out bottom, and this one is straight. So, you know, I have like a good inch gap. I'm trying to, you know, I mean, obviously I could move my faucet over if I wanted to, but I'm going to try to keep it in the same location. But I'm going to have to do something either tear up the floor and redo it, or do something like this where I just put a piece alongside the tub. I'm gonna ask the owner what they think. But really, you know, the way that this isn't even, this is like 1.25 inches to the widest gap. So it's just kind of disappointing, but that's just the way it is. And I don't want to move this whole tub out and then have, like, you know, you basically shimming out the back wall by 2 inches and I have to move the faucet over and everything else. So all I'm going to do is basically put 1/2 inch plywood, and I'm going to fur out this back wall 1 inch to bring this out. So yeah, about 1 inch, and then 1/2 inch on this side. So 1/2 inch on either side, and then 1 inch on the back. And the other thing you want to pay attention to at this stage is evaluating, because you don't, I mean, you can keep putting this back in, and we're going to have to put the tub back in again to address where the actual ledger board is going to be. But just make sure that this is level, or try to evaluate what you have to do to make it level. But we'll shim everything out first, and then we'll have to, you know, fight with getting it level. Okay, so we're gonna add another stud in this corner because there wasn't really a lot here, and once I move this wall out 1 inch, I'm not gonna have a whole lot to work with. Okay, so we got the tub placed. So they have these feet on here. So you just want to kind of walk around, make sure this thing isn't moving. For one, make sure that the floor is somewhat level. So that feels pretty good to me. Everything's kind of sitting right. So you just want to put a level on this and make sure that every angle is level. And we're looking pretty good. So maybe even just check the 4-foot level on the back, and then on the front tub rim we're looking pretty good. So if everything's level, then you can just go ahead and mark your flange, and then we're going to measure down for our support. So we're going to take this out again and put that ledger board down. So we're going to measure down for that ledger board. That's the only thing you need, is just on this back area is a ledger board on the back. And I do want to note one thing, if you come over here. So one thing is I left out the stud here. I'm going to be putting another stud for this to anchor into. And the reason is because this tub can kind of go into the cavity for me to pull it out. If you have framing right here, you're going to have to cut it out in order to get the tub out. Okay, so a tub flange is not all uniform. So you're kind of guessing of how thick this is. So we marked that line, and we're going to try to make it the thickness. Try to gauge it, and we're going to have to put the tub back in to test it and make sure it's sitting right. So we got like 1.75 inches. Yeah, it looks like about 1.75 inches. You have to measure that though, because every one of these are a little bit different. The fiberglass can be thicker in some areas than others. So yeah, 1.75 inches should work. Okay, so we'll just measure down 1.75 inches. Okay, so it's nice and level. Okay, so you can see how this is going to go into the wall cavity. So that's what's going to allow me to be able to slide it in between the two walls. Make sure this is sitting level. That looks good. That looks good. And then I can reach around and I can actually feel the ledger board meeting on top of this ledge. So that's perfect. And I make sure, you know, step in the tub, make sure nothing's moving. And those blocks are right where we are. So we got enough levelness that we don't have to do a mortar bed on this. This particular tub is designed to be able to just go in without having to do a mortar bed. But if you were out of level, you could do two things. One, you can do floor leveler, make it level, and then set the tub. Or two, use a mortar bed and level it out. Now in this situation, with these walls being all tight, it's going to be really tough with a mortar bed, just because maneuvering this in, you're going to like move that mortar around before you get it set. So my advice would be to get the floor level if it's not level, and then set the tub. So you could pretty much floor level, you know, and then in an hour or two set the tub. All right, so we're going to pull it out again so you can see these foam pads. This is what it's resting on the floor and, you know, keeping that tub set. But if you were on level, just get enough mortar under here, and as long as you have support underneath these foam pads, you'll be in good shape. But it really does make it easy when you have a nice level floor. There's not as much work to do. I'm going to put some just silicone on this ledger board. So this is going to help just kind of secure it in place. Make sure that there isn't any creaking or anything like that. So just put a generous 1/4 inch bead on here, and that'll help secure that tub in place. Okay, we are where we need to be. Everything's level. That looks pretty good. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so pilot bit, 1/8 inch bit. Use some galvanized screws. Okay, so then if you have any gaps here, you can go ahead and just shim them. It's pretty level. Kind of makes it a little bit easier to make sure that you're basically able to close the drain easily. And I've never really had an issue with these. A lot of those pop-up drains, or even the toe kick ones, they always seem to break. So I do like the cable, but it's definitely a challenge to do this by yourself. So and all it does is basically it just has your little drain flange and then a nut that threads into this bolt inside of the drain assembly. So your silicone is going to be friend here, especially if you're doing this by yourself. So 100% silicone, and we're going to apply this on the actual drain hub. And then, I mean, obviously if you had a new one, you're going to have a nice new looking rubber gasket here, but since this was already used, it is what it is. These things are kind of expensive, so that's why I kind of kept it. But I'm gonna go around the back side to connect this, and so we'll just let that sit there for right now. But you do want to put a generous amount on the actual tub. So don't worry about too much silicone. You're better off to have too much than not enough. And you can always, you know, remove the excess after you're done. And then same thing with this. Just put a nice 1/4 inch bead all the way around this. And then we'll just set that there for now. So you can see how that's oozing out of there. That's what you want to see. And then what we're going to do is basically try to connect this from the back side of the tub. Okay, so all I'm going to do is reach under here. Make sure you have plenty of silicone around that. excess. Actually, just go ahead and tighten a little bit more. You can just remove any excess silicone around that drain. Okay. It just has a little thing that slips in here, and this just basically tightens on here. Okay. All right, so we're going to connect our tub drain, and the best way to go about venting a tub drain is just to have a sanitary tee straight up and down, just like your vanity, and make sure that everything's solvent well. That'll make sure that you're going to be able to have a good sound installation. So we're going to go ahead and install this first, because we have an existing vent stack that's connecting to this main copper line in the bathroom. So we'll connect our drain with the P-trap first, and then connect everything else to the main waste stack. Tighten this slip fitting so that this stays together up here. Together. So we're just going to connect this existing Fernco. And this vent goes up to the main waste stack. So now our tub's completely vented here. So it does get a little bit messy with the primer on some of these things sometimes, but to get the angle in there, it kind of makes it tough. Now, a lot of ways I could have connected all this together and then just done this one elbow here. Since I made it a little bit easier, but either way, just as long as everything's glued and primed, you should be in good shape. Okay, so next day or even an hour later after that silicone sets up, this is a really important step. You want to make sure you fill your entire tub, and then make sure that you check the overflow as well. So make sure you fill this up, because the overflow is just as important as the real drain. You want to make sure that you don't get any leaks. So pay attention right around here, make sure nothing's leaking. With that all silicone there, you should be in good shape. And then if you have access below, obviously you can check everything below here, make sure nothing's leaking. But right now that's all draining through that overflow. So that really makes you feel confident with the installation. Okay, so we got everything tested. Now you can just twist, this just twists up and pulls the drain up, and you can let it go. So I hope those tips helped you out on installing a jacuzzi tub. We're going to be much better off with this solid constructed tub. Be sure to check out my other video on an American Standard tub that I really recommend. But do your research, make sure you're getting something that's of high quality, because this bathroom should last 20-30 years no problem, and it's just a matter of getting a good quality material. So give me a like on this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much. All right, so if you're getting into a tub surround that has a window, this would be a great time to plan ahead and order a window so that you can replace it when you actually tear out the tub surround. So this old existing window, I mean, they put some kind of obscure tape over it, which looks really ugly. The seals are broken in it. Now you could possibly get this window repaired, getting new glass in each one of these sashes, but it really is going to cost just the same amount to buy a whole new window. And once you're at this stage, we have everything basically gutted, it's just easier to replace. So we're going to go ahead and replace this, and we're going to move into waterproofing around it. Okay, so you want to make sure that you close your latch because that'll keep everything kind of square. So let's go ahead and check to see what this even looks like. You know, and I'm probably just gonna put a new piece of flashing up there on the outside. So that's quite a bit. Yeah, sits pretty level that way. Pretty plumb on those existing flanges. So this is your most important thing. Okay, so we're gonna use a white silicone, 100% silicone. So we're really not trying to recreate the whole entire wheel here. We're just gonna basically install this existing trim back on here. And you know, honestly, if I was redoing all the windows, I'd definitely replace all of the flashing, but we're really just doing kind of like a repair here in a sense. So it's not pretty, but here's the outside of the house. Basically just got everything sealed. Now we can go ahead and do that spray foam on the inside of the window. All right, so we got the outside all set. Now we're gonna do some spray foam. This is really the best way to insulate the window, but make sure you get the window and door kind, because the regular stuff in the red can will expand out too much and it could possibly, you know, move that window or cause problems. So this stuff is made to not expand and kind of move anything. But I'm going to take this top board out of here because this isn't going to really help us here. Okay, so I could slide a 2x4 all the way in here, but then you'd have a big hollow cavity right here where cold air can come in. So that's why I'm going to do the insulation first, because, you know, wood doesn't have a very good R value. You know, even though all these studs and everything, I mean, it just doesn't have the same R value as the spray foam. So we're going to put the spray foam in first. We want to match this side over here, which is 1 3/8. So if I just add another piece of 1/2 inch board, and we'll just, anything that comes out of here, we'll just cut tomorrow. So, but that should be good. Now we'll be able to get our board straight up against the actual window and seal against that, but don't touch any of this stuff until it dries. And you can scrape and make sure there's nothing on the window. All right, so this could be a common problem, especially when you're lining up with the existing wall. So if you're just replacing your tub and putting in new surround, sometimes the wallboard and the tub, so a lot of times in these older homes, the distance between your walls were actually a lot further. The rough-in framing was a lot further because a lot of times they use plaster, sometimes they use drywall, but you know, a lot of times they have plaster and it's thicker than the actual drywall. So when you have your tub flange like this, you need to shim in your tub to make it fit. So I ended up using some 1/2 inch furring strips here. I didn't realize that this is going to be a major issue. So you can see my backer board, if I went over that, is going to be sticking outside of the drywall area. There's really no good way to finish that. So what I'm going to have to do is remove these shims and basically get this. This is not a problem down here because we have this wainscoting here. And so this is going to hide some of this. So even if I went with that full 1/2 inch down here, I'll be okay with my Schluter edge. You won't be able to see any of that. But up here, it's going to be a major problem. So I'm going to cut out my existing 1/2 inch pieces of plywood here. The other problem that I noticed is that I'm really far off with evenness. So this is not, you know, well, actually that's not too bad that way. But, you know, I basically have a good solid 1/4 inch of play here. So we're going to address that as well. But I'm going to take off these 1/2 inch pieces of plywood first and then basically make it form with my existing wall. That's kind of what you're doing. You're pretty much making it work with your existing wall. Doesn't matter about plumbness. That's, at this point, that's not really your problem unless you're going to try to replace all the drywall in the bathroom. So you're basically just going off of what you're existing with. Okay, so as you can see, when I have my board straight up on top of my 2x4 here, I'm pretty even up here, and then it kind of becomes more pronounced out here. So what I'm going to do is shim this out, because one of the issues right now is if I just put my backer board right here, you're going to have this tub flange that's exposed. I'm not going to be able to tile over that. So this needs to be kind of out to even with my tub flange so that I can tile and all my tile is nice and straight. So I do need that 1/2 inch material down here, but I need to go to nothing up here. So my suggestion is to get a 2x4 up against here and then just kind of wedge it out. Again, we're going off of our existing wall. We're not concerned about plumb. You know, in an ideal world, everything would be nice, straight and plumb and level. But if you're trying to keep your existing wall, you kind of have to go with what you're doing. Okay, so what we're going to do is going to make this that 1/2 inch out. So this 1/2 inch material down here, we're going to keep it at that level. So now this is going to be our guide for what we want the wall to be. I'm not concerned about plumbness. I just want to make this even with my drywall. Yeah, that should work out well. So it does kind of bellow, it does kind of stick out a little bit down here, but this wainscoting, you know, I'm going to have a Schluter edge that goes right along there. You won't even be able to tell. But the important thing is that this board is nice and even with this now. So when I tile up to this point, it'll look good. And we're going to put another 2x4 here, and then we'll just kind of fill in some areas just to keep the backer board straight. So we're going to do the same concept with a new 2x4 here. Okay, so my tub flange is straight, so we're going with that. Most likely this wall isn't square either, so that doesn't matter. But as you can see here, you can see how much of a gap I have between my wall stud and my flange. I'm almost an inch right there. So we're going to go off of the tub flange on the bottom, bring that out, so then my backer board will come right on top of the flange. And you just want to make this will most likely be even with the top and be fine. Because even this, that's not too bad actually. We'll just bring it out plumb. Okay, so that's plumb there. And now again, we'll just bring this stud out to the middle. So we almost have 1/2 inch. It's going to be uneven throughout, probably. Yeah, we got almost 5/8 of an inch. So again, we'll do the same thing with another stud, sister onto this, and bring it out even with this. Yeah, the existing wall is definitely on plumb. This still needed to come out. So we're actually improving this. So if you wanted to do shower doors, that'll make it nice. So let me do one more stud in the middle here. Okay, so keep this even with the tub, back of the tub flange. Yeah, that'll make it all nice and flat. double check this again. Pretty good. Pretty good. Okay, so we're just gonna use some 1/4 inch material and 1/2 inch because that's what I got. And we'll just fill in this corner back here just so there's some support. But really, I'm gonna be screwing into my main stud. All right, we have to address the wall that's actually the issue here, which is this existing plaster wall. And we're gonna be doing the same thing, basically making that go up to nothing because we had to have the tub shimmed out. So we're kind of going 1/2 inch to nothing up there. So let's go ahead and cut this stud out. Okay, so that's within reason. A little bit of proud right here, but that's nothing that I can't overcome. So then we'll just get some shims right in here. Okay, not bad. So we're just going to go with our full corner here, so we just need to bring this out a little bit. You could even use a 1x material too if you wanted to. Shim this out. So you don't necessarily need to sister an entire stud on there if you don't want to. Okay, so it keeps it all nice and straight there. Within reason. Like I said, if you're within, or an 1/8 inch really, you're fine. So that's like about a 1/16 right there, a little bit high right in the center there, but that's not gonna interfere with my wall. I mean, I really don't have much at all, so. But that makes sure that everything's even. The other thing you just wanna pay attention to is making sure that everything's within 16 inches on center, all the way around. And that's primarily just for the fasteners of the HYDROBLOK board. But now that you got all the framing done, now we can move into the real easy part, which is actually adhering all the waterproofing into place. Okay, so the tub flange, we're sticking out a 1/4 inch, so we have to address that. I can't just bring my board down and bring it over, or you're gonna bellow it out and it's gonna really look bad with the tile work. So the way we're gonna address this is we're actually gonna notch out our board so that it can slide over that tub flange and meet the tub deck. So let's go ahead and bring our whole board out and we'll create that dado. Okay, so you can see how that's whole rapid jointed out there. Whether you're overcoming the tub flange and bringing the board straight down, or what we're doing, you want to put a bead of sealant all the way along this flange. Since we're going to be basically having that little flange come across there, I'm going to bring it all the way across the top. So you can kind of see that oozing out of that joint. And that's all nice and straight. So you can see all that sealant kind of oozing out of that joint. That means that we got that nice and sealed in there, and that overcomes that flange pretty nicely. And you're basically just making them flush with the wall. So just tighten them enough to where, you know, they're basically a little bit recessed within the wall. Anything you puncture like that, we'll be able to fill in with sealant. Now this next screw, I'm gonna wait until I get my next board on, because then you can do one screw and pinch both of them. Save yourself a couple of these washers. Any excess silicone or sealant, you can just wipe smooth. Cut around the window, you could use an oscillating tool, you could use a utility knife, or you can use a router, or basically a drywall router here. So I'm going to use this. I'm just going to basically zip out my window. When two boards meet, I'm going to put a generous amount of sealant right along that seam here. See it oozing out, that's good. So here's this little piece. Tell you what, this is a great thing about this type of board is you can, if your ceiling's a little bit uneven, you can just easily scribe cut this. All right, that should be good. Okay, we'll deal with the window later on. We got 5 sheets. This will be more than enough, but you want to keep your scrap pieces to do something like this. So let's go ahead and do our side wall here. On this one, we're just going to be butting straight up to the flange. So we want to make sure we have a good sealant amount right on top of that flange. So that's definitely a really easy way to cut this. Now go ahead and set this into place. Now you do need a sealant where you're meeting the other board in the corner here. So put a generous amount all the way down that corner. Basically slide this right down to the top of that flange. Same thing, since we already have shims and everything, and our flange is sticking way out of here, we're gonna have to basically just go on top of the tub flange, so 30.5, 31. There's not a lot of room here, so about 1.5 inches is that flange. Indicates my pipe right there. And then our shower valve, very easy. Just basically puncture the back, and that'll indicate the middle of our valve. 4.5-inch hole works nicely. Yep, just like that. Fair amount on the top of your tub flange. Okay, so the window, probably the most critical part of this entire tub surround. because it's something that really isn't that friendly to having water to. So first off, we need to cut some of our foam insulation out of here nice and flush. Okay, so most important thing about a window is making sure that you actually have vinyl window to bond into. So make sure you build out your window enough for the board to completely go inside of the window frame so that you're butting this completely to vinyl, because the biggest part about this seal is going right around, right onto the vinyl. So you don't want it to be halfway on the board. You want this entire edge being bonded to the window, especially the bottom. So we're going to start with the bottom, do our sides, and then do our top. It's kind of like window flashing. You know, when water comes down, it goes around, but everything's going to be sealed, so we don't really have much to worry about. So let's just go ahead and put our bottom plate on first. Want to make sure you get plenty of sealant on top of this board. So this would be kind of just like the regular pieces of board come together. Put a nice generous amount. And then I'm also going to put some on the back edge here and up against the window. So you can see I have a whole lot of this on this sill. And I'm putting more on some on the base of this too, because I'm kind of sloping this towards the shower. So you want to make sure you can see that all oozing up against that window. That's a good seal right there. And then you want to make sure that you're pitching towards the shower, because you don't want water to be sitting against the window. So just make sure that this is pitching, and then obviously making sure it's level that way as well. So we're going to apply some sealant over these screw holes, so this will end up being completely covered. But if you did have any of this green exposed, it's no problem at all. It's completely waterproof all the way through this board, so you have nothing to worry about there. Now I don't want all this stuff being on my window, so I'm just going to basically pull some of this away from my window. Now you can get this stuff off of your window. Don't worry if you got any on there. You know, later on you can use some acetone or something to remove it. But if you can avoid getting it all smeared on there, the better. But now that's a nice, really nice seal to the bottom of that window. Okay, so put a generous amount right at the corner, all the way up the side, and then all the way down the window. This is why the sealant application is so easy, because you're literally just sealing it to that window, and that's all there really is to it. So you want to see that oozing out of that window frame. Again, pull this away from the window a little bit. Another real critical area to waterproof is right against the downside, the edge of the tub. And since the flange is kind of sticking out and we're trying to want to keep everything flush with this, we're just going to use a strip of the board that we cut off of that back sheet. So this is just the part that we cut to overcome this flange. And we're just going to seal this right to the flange and kind of build that out a little bit. This is a real critical area because water sometimes always comes down over the edge of the tub and then deteriorates that. So if this was drywall, a lot of times when I see drywall along the tub, that's usually a major problem. So if you can put waterproofing down alongside your tub at least a couple of inches, it'll make it last a lot longer. Put a real fair amount of sealant all the way down the edge of this tub. this will just go embed right over top of this. Since this flange is even with my board, we're just going to fill this entire cavity with the sealant. The screw holes basically need like an inch overlap. I can basically just fill them all in with the sealant. Your seams again. Around the window, just go across this entire seam. Make sure to get these little and again, if you have any of this green exposed, it's not a big deal. Just know that the thinset will actually bond better to the sealant than the actual like exposed green stuff here. So it is kind of better to completely cover it, but it's not necessary. Might not be a bad idea just to basically do this whole sill. Completely sealed surface here. Okay, and then the corners, just put a nice generous bead down the corner. This is a mixing valve seal. This is great for sealing around your valve. A lot of these escutcheon plates don't really seal all that well. So let's just make sure that this is centered around here. So this has two sides to it. One has a big fat end. This side actually goes into the wall. So just center that up. That looks all right. And then you can use thinset, or you can just use the sealant to do this. Just that if you do sealant, you're going to want to spread this out to make it nice and smooth. Okay. And then one of the most critical parts is around your tub spout. So this guy will go right over top of this and seal. Okay, and I'm actually gonna just seal my copper to it. Okay, so now you don't have to be dependent on your tub spout to prevent water from going back there. This is a very common area where leaks happen because there really isn't any type of seal around your tub spout. And if water gets behind the tub spout, it can just leak right through that hole. So having this completely sealed will ensure that you won't have any problems there. This could be considered overkill, but it's a good thing to completely seal around here so that there's no leaks around your shower head. All right, let me show you a quick, easy way to be efficient with your tile work. So if you're doing any type of mosaic border of any sort, something like this glass mosaic, set them on a sheet of Kerdi membrane the night before. Now this stuff comes in different size rolls. The most common one is about 5 inches. We're gonna split this thing in half, so it's gonna be just roughly around 6 inches wide. I always say just go ahead and make it as wide as you can, and then you can cut it down later. Depending on how the pattern works out and maybe what the customer really wants. In this particular situation, we're just literally cutting it in half. So I got the 7.5 inch roll. This is only 16 foot wide. And since I'm doing a regular tub surround, I really only need 11 feet of it. So it works out well. So let's get this out. But this will save a lot of time and headache with installing the border and making sure that you set it at the correct depth, at the same depth as the wall tile. So this is all it is. It's just a sheet membrane. And we're gonna use some ARDEX X5 for the thin set. And we're gonna thin set this. And I'm doing this the night before so that everything is nice and well bonded. And then I can go ahead and put this in. So if you're doing smaller quantities of stuff, it's roughly 2 parts powder, 1 part water. So just go ahead and roll. So that's about 5 foot there. So we'll cut these in half. And one annoying thing about some of these, they're no longer like universally done. They're different sizes. So you can tell they're kind of randomly set. But it looks like if I set them right in half, they should line up. Yeah, it looks like, well, no, it doesn't line up that way. Unbelievable. It's pretty annoying. They're really making it tough on you to be able to just buy a few sheets of this. They're really making this stuff so that you have to buy more than you need. Okay, there. Okay, so that should give me plenty of room. Yeah, I've got plenty of it there now. That should be good. I'm just directionally trowel. Okay, so we'll be cutting off this excess. I'll just use a grout float to embed it. Okay, so this being set up will make the installation of this a lot easier. I'll be able to line that straight up with the tile. Won't have to like really, I mean, I'll be using some shims to kind of hold it in place, but you're not gonna have to struggle, you know, trying to get this aligned so much, because I can build up as much as I want behind there. But taking the extra time the night before to do this, really well worth the effort. Okay, so tile layout. A window is probably going to be the most complicated part of this project. And, you know, if you have limited tools to be able to do this stuff, you need to kind of plan ahead and try to eliminate, you know, anything that's going to be really difficult for you to cut. So, and, you know, every situation is different. Every window size is a little bit different. So it's kind of hard to reference a blanketed statement on how to go about this. But really the objective is try to eliminate any slivers and then having any complicated cuts that are going to make it difficult for you. So if you have all the great equipment like I have, you can pretty much don't have to be concerned about how complicated the cut is. But if you're just trying to, you know, do this with limited tools, like we're using that Harbor Freight tabletop wet saw, and that's all you have, you kind of got to try to make sure that you don't have too many difficult cuts to be able to work around. So first thing is we're going to be putting a border in this surround. And one nice thing about having these linear type of borders is that if you got into a pinch where, you know, you didn't lay out 100% properly and you're trying to eliminate a sliver from the top, you can always add on another row or cut down a row to adjust it to what you want. So it really does give you a lot of flexibility when it comes to laying things out, but you still want to go over the overall layout. So let's just find the center from the top of the tub to the top of the wall here. So we got 74 inches. Yeah, 37 inches would be the center. So this is our center line. Basically my objective is to have even cut here and an even cut here. So that'll be where my full tile comes. Now, if that's not gonna look so great, you'd have a sliver of that border. One thing I don't like right here is like a small cut. Maybe if that'll give us a 4.5 inch piece at the bottom. I mean, it's not terrible. It's just that I like the fuller looking tiles. And you know what? And if I did that, maybe if you did the border here, unless you try to make this, not gonna work. No. You fucker.
Smaller, then yeah, it would look weird.
And this looks like a bigger tile at the bottom.
Yeah, which is important, more important than the top.
All right, so when it comes to layout, you can see I already have a whole bunch of tick marks. I've been trying to lay this out and try to come up with the best devised plan. And sometimes that can be really difficult because the whole idea is to eliminate slivers. And then if you only have limited equipment or you have tile that's kind of tough to cut, you kind of want to make this as easy as possible. The window certainly doesn't do that. This is really probably the most complicated part of this project. So we're going to go ahead and run our first row, 7 inches. We're going to use our laser. Just run that straight on that mark. And then we're going to start on the back wall of the shower. So any tile that's with, you know, 6-inch increments. So this is like a 24-inch tile. On a regular standard tub surround, if you just start from center, it's going to work out well. So 59, 29.5. So if you're doing a staggered pattern like we're going to be doing, you know, you're basically going to have a 6-inch piece on either side on this, and then when you go to the half pattern, you're going to have some nice full tiles. So anything within 6 inches, if you're doing subway tile, 12-inch tile, 24-inch tile, it always works out great on the back wall to just start from center and work your way over. Now, one thing I didn't pay attention to was the 29.5 is the center. I'm betting this window is not 100% even either. 8.5, 8. So it's a 1/2 inch off. I do have a little bit of playroom, 7/8. 7/8. The window frame is even, so I mean we're 1/2 inch off center. So when I cut these pieces, this piece is going to be a 1/2 inch smaller than this piece. We can offset it a little bit. We can add a little bit more onto the distance over here to kind of offset that. Maybe make it a 1/4 inch, so it's not quite as noticeable. You're going to just notice that a lot more you know, because you're going to basically be having a bigger, you know, just it's going to be slightly bigger than the other side. But you're kind of stuck with what you got. This is remodeling, and this is what we have existing here. Okay, so when it comes to thin set, this is really where I think you should spend a little bit extra money and get a good quality thin set. It's going to make tile setting so much easier. And when you get something like ARDEX X5, this is a non-sag modified thin set. So it makes it easier when you're setting the tile, they don't move as much. But what's really great about this stuff, you have plenty of pot life. Most of the time, I've gotten at least 3 hours worth of pot life, you know, after you mix it, the time that you can take to use it. And that's really helpful for beginners because you need a lot more time to be able to cut all these things, especially if you're using the wet saw like I am today. So, you know, spend a little extra money on this, maybe save yourself a little bit on those tile saws, but spend the extra money on the thin set. It's going to make it a lot easier. Always measure your water too as well. So let's go ahead and we're gonna just mix a half a bag, and we're gonna use our beast mixer. This is a rubber liner, kind of saves buckets, makes it kind of nice, and basically 3.5 quarts. A nice big powerful mixer like this is really helpful. Obviously not a requirement. Just get one that has like the 4-prong paddles on it, because you need to be able to spin and mix the thin set efficiently. When it comes to trials, there's many different sizes out there, obviously. We're doing the 12 by 24 inch ceramic tiles. So you're going to want something that's a little bit bigger so that you can make sure that you get plenty of coverage behind it. So you really can use, all 3 of these are pretty efficient trials. So we have a 3/8 by 3/8 inch square notch trowel, totally sufficient most likely to cover this. A 3/8 by 1/2 inch U-notch trowel, so that gives you a little bit more than the 3/8 by 3/8. You have the Euro trowel, which is kind of a combination of a 1/4, 3/8, and 1/2 inch trowel. You can see the kind of funky pattern on the back. I really like using these. These are really efficient for getting good coverage. It collapses the ridges and makes it really, you know, it gives basically the minimum amount of thin set that you need to cover large format tile. And then if you really do have kind of an uneven substrate, you can even go up to a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. I do this on floors a lot when I have any type of unevenness. This allows you to be able to collapse the ridges, have plenty of thin set underneath the tile, and eliminate the lippage. But it really all comes down to what your substrate is and how flat it is. Most of the time, if it's pretty flat, this just works out properly. But you want to check the coverage of the tile that you set, and then bump up the size of trowel if you're not getting what you would consider good coverage. So we'll demonstrate that, but we're going to use our Euro-notch trowel. It's pretty much my favorite trowel to use. And yeah, so first thing is we're going to set this first up. Let's make sure that this is going to work here fine. Okay, so we're going to try to do this whole tub surround with just this little inexpensive tabletop saw. It is a little bit cumbersome to rip down full pieces of tile like this on something like this. It's just going to take some patience, some time. You can't really force it. You kind of have to let the blade cut. We have the existing blade that we bought with this. This is a $200 saw at Harbor Freight. So it's, you know, so far I'm pretty happy with it. I think you could pretty much do an entire tub surround like this pretty easily. So let's measure over 7 inches. That's the size of tile that we want for our first row. Okay, yeah, pretty good cuts. Just to show you the difference of how much faster a snap cutter really is though. You know, you can pretty much just stick this on here. And if you get a lot, yeah, quicker of a cut. So it's definitely a lot faster with the snap cutter, but that saw does pretty good with cutting it. You know, ceramic tile is usually really easy to cut. Oh, that's my cut piece. That's pretty good. The factory edge I couldn't even really see here, so that's a good problem to have here. So it looks like I'm a little high on this side. It must be probably just some of my stuff there. So we'll just do a little bit of a grind cut to make sure that this stays even. But you want to have expansion contraction at the bottom of the tub. But let's go ahead and fine tune this piece before we go setting it. So this is where this shop vac setup is really nice because I'm able to scribe cut right here. Okay, so you can see this is a really kind of pancake type of batter, thin set, and you would consider that a pretty nice non-sag. So the first step is just to burn the thin set into the substrate so that you get good coverage. So take the flat side of the trowel and just work that into the substrate. You want to do directional troweling. And then something like this, you want to back butter it. So take the flat side of the trowel and just coat that whole back. Okay, so let's just make sure we're going to be where we want to be here. We'll just even this up. So 17 3/4, 17 1/2, 17 5/8. 17 5/8, so that's directly centered there. You want to make sure that those ridges are collapsed, and then we want to provide just a little space between the tub, and you can also just make sure you shim up to your laser level here. You know, the first row is really just about paying attention to that laser and making sure that that's completely even across there. So let's go ahead and cut our side pieces. So we got 17 5/8. Make it like 17 3/8. Give ourselves a little more. You can even do 17 1/4. And I should mention, the main reason that I'm doing the back wall first is so that when I bring my wall tile on the sides, it kind of hides the grout joint from your visual reference from the outside of the shower. So that really kind of takes a little bit of the stress off starting out on your tile work, doing the back wall first. And it really, you know, you're going to be caulking that corner. But the important thing is to make sure that everything, the cuts and everything are going to be good on this side. It'll be a lot easier just to focus on one side of the area. So let's go ahead and cut these 17 3/8. So 17 3/8. Okay, so anytime you put that on a wet saw, you want to wipe it down. Because the water can actually be a bond breaker. So just have a rag on hand. Now the other thing we're going to be using that's going to make this a lot easier is a leveling system. So this is called Perfect Level Master. And then what this is going to do is allow us to tighten and make sure that we don't have any lippage in between the tiles. So we'll just put one on each side of this tile, and then the wedge system will hold it into place. So let's just double check our height here. No, that's the, tell you what, I can't even tell which one's the factory edge here. That's actually a pretty good problem. Okay, so see what this laser looks like. Looks pretty good. You just take this and tighten it, so that makes it so it's all nice and even in between the tiles. Kind of gives you some extra leverage to be able to do that. You know, these leveling clips are definitely a very helpful system for something like this. All right, so let's do the other side. It's a little high here on the back end, so we got to scribe cut this to make sure that this laser stays even. So when you're selecting a leveling clip, you really want to pay attention to the sides of your tile. So as you can see here, this is completely straight, rectified. So when I put this because these come in different sizes. This comes in 16th or 1/32, 16th, and then 1/8 inch. So these are basically are the spacers. So if you have a tile that's not rectified, make sure you get the smaller size clips so you can get the size grout joint that you want. I usually prefer 16th inch grout joints, but that really is all of personal preference. So since this is nice and rectified, we're going with 1/16. And we basically just do the same pattern on the next row. So for the leveling clips, just take a finger or a margin trowel, wipe off the top layer of the tile, because you want to eliminate that thin set from wedging in between. And typically I go with 2 pieces on either side. So 2 clips on either side to tension it. Okay, so this is where you can pull back a tile and just check your coverage. As you can see, I basically have everything suctioning off of here. It's not too bad. You just want to make sure that you see it suctioning off. You don't want to see the trowel lines not being collapsed or not having, you know, if you just saw compressed trowel lines and they're not kind of, you know, deformed in any way, then that means that you're not getting enough coverage on it. So again, let's measure this again. So 11, 13/16. This little tool is really helpful. This little linoleum knife allows you to maneuver things so that you can move the tile to where you need it. Take these wedges, and it really helps force these things to stay in line with one another. All right, so this is going to be the most difficult cut out of the whole tub surround, is right at this window. Let's get our spacers in here so that we can make sure that these stay where we need them to be. Okay, yeah, the laser looks good. It's always good to double check that. And so we want to put this right on laser here. Okay, and then let's go ahead. Well, we can honestly just measure down to the windowsill. So make sure that this is aligned well. All right, so what I would recommend, now you can see here, I'm gonna probably have 3 7/8, and this is 3 1/4. So our window is not exactly 100% even. There's really not a whole heck of a lot we're gonna be able to do about it. But we could bring this over and overhang this window slightly to kind of offset that a little bit. You have some more, a little bit more reveal on this side than this side. So we do have a little bit of fudge room. So let's just go ahead and make this side. So we'll go 3 1/2 for our cut. On this side, we want to overhang just a little, I mean, just a hair, like a 16th. So we're going to go 3 7/8. So we're basically going to be 3/8 inch bigger on this side than the other. Really not much you're going to be able to do about that. And then measuring down, so right now we have a 4 7/16 is really what we have. So if we just made this 4 1/8, that's going to overhang that. And you can see all the windowsill here. We have plenty of room here to be able to grow this up. So it definitely gives us a lot of flexibility. So we're going to cut this down 4 1/8. And that's going to allow this piece to be above that sill about a good 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch. So this is what we're going to have to cut, is this L notch. This is going to be the most complicated, or the U notch I should say. This is going to be the most complicated cut that we're going to be doing today. Let's go ahead and use our square. Mark this with pencil. Okay, then we were going to go 4 1/8 So make sure we have those cross tees. This is the tricky part. So this is where you're going to want to have a good grinder to be able to cut this. Because really, with this type of saw, there's really no other way. Now, when you have a saw like the DeWalt, you can plunge cut down into this. But that's where buying a good blade like this Montolit CGX blade is really going to be worth the expense to be able to do this. So we're just going to basically cut that line straight down, and hopefully we get a nice straight cut. Yeah, I can live with that. Let's see what that looks like with the edging. Just hold on a sec. Let's just sand this up a little bit. Okay, so the only way you're going to be able to tell whether this is going to look good is just to use your Schluter edging. I'm pretty happy with that. Looks pretty good. So this is the most complicated cut. That means you can get everything else done. So really 3 things that you really want to have on a project like this. 1, the wet saw. So this little tiny saw here. And then a sanding pad and a good grinder blade. You could pretty much do anything with that. It just might take a little bit more time and a little bit of precision with your hand with grinding, but you can do it. Ceramic tile is really forgiving and easy to cut. That's about even there. So when I put this on here, it's going to overcome the edge here. So we got a good 1/2 inch, plenty of room. This side, same thing. Actually, we have a little bit more room because we're bringing that over a little bit. So we have about almost 11/16 is basically what I have over here. So just about 3/4 of an inch. But that's going to work out perfectly. So just as long as you're about even with the edge of here, that's going to be sufficient. Once you get the Schluter edging on, bumps you out. And we have plenty of room here. We have a good 1/4 inch. So once I put this down on the bottom, I have 3/4 of an inch at the bottom. Plenty of room to be able to make that bottom sill meet up with this. So the idea is to get all the wall tile up first, and then we'll work on finishing around the window. Okay, just use this as a guide. Keep that where everything's nice and even. Looks good. One thing about these saws that are pretty difficult, especially when you're trying to do a smaller piece like this, is to prevent from having like a little chip right at the end. So you really have to take your time when you're running this through this saw. So that's one thing about this tabletop that's going to be tough, and that's acceptable. I mean, it's almost a very slight off cut, but you just have to take it really slow at the end if you're trying to make this a nice even cut. All right, so I think what we'll do is we'll get our side pieces up here so that we have a good ability to get our border right where we want it. So we'll basically, right about there. So we'll make two side legs, 35. Should be enough. We'll allow this just to hang down slightly here so that we have plenty enough room. So, yeah. Okay, so this, I've really, I used to use this right up against the fence. It used to be kind of blow up on me, and it was really kind of dangerous. Thankfully, Cali Dad, Tile Bro made this really awesome plastic device that holds your Schluter edge into the piece. So you can use this on the wet saw, or you can use this on a regular trim saw. So I'm gonna cut my angle that I need to be right here. That is a much, much safer apparatus to hold this into place. Thanks, Tile Bro. So since this is gonna be our outside edge, we need to be coming this way. Let's go ahead and cut a straight cut first. Yep. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so now we got that set. I'm gonna get some thin set behind her just to make sure that these stay set in there. So if you're gonna wait till the next day to do this, I would definitely make sure it's cleared behind her so you don't have any problems meeting the tile to this. This out to meet the tile, do that. So we're gonna use some of these horseshoe shims to make sure that this stays even. You can really just kind of hold it there till the thin set dries too. You don't have to necessarily push them all the way in. Just make sure everything's nice and even. You're gonna be just grouting straight up against this edging. So it looks all pretty good. Now we have a defined space to butt our border up to, and then we'll do this piece once we get the tile at that level. Okay, so for the glass, we have way more than we need. Originally I was intending to put this all the way across the top, but it just wasn't going to look right, so we're just going to be cutting a couple 20-inch pieces out of it. Again, a good blade really makes a difference, so we're going to cut this and cut it to length. That's really not a nice cut. We're going to go ahead and make this longer than what we need, so then this can be in the corner and you won't see it. So we needed 21 3/8, so we'll just make a 24, and we'll cut it on the wet side because this is just not going to cut well. Glass is pretty tough. That'll work. It's not bad. It'll do. So this definitely makes it nice. Put it on the Schluter Curdy band the night before, and now I can build up my border to meet my tile layer. I can add as much thinness as I want behind here, just like a regular piece of tile. Where'd the fat on at the bottom? So now that could be nice and even with my tile with no difficulty. Let me just space this whole unit up. like that. It sure does make it easy. And then when you go to put the next tile on top of there, nothing's squeezing, nothing's moving. It's just like a solid piece of tile. So let's go ahead and do the other side. All right, so that was the complicated part of the project. The rest of it's going to seem very easy comparatively. But yeah, there's a lot of cuts, and it's just a matter of being patient and just doing the best that you can. Just know that, you know, grout usually doesn't hide anything. So if you have a chip somewhere, it's not going to hide it. It's hopeful thinking, but you're better off just to cut another piece when you see a problem. But the schluter edging, it's definitely something that takes a little bit of patience because everything has to be perfectly cut. Along here, you can basically see every imperfection if it's, you know, kind of tapered out the corner or anything like that. So, you know, that's one thing you might consider is doing a different type of edging for your window where it's a little bit more forgiving. You know, you can use like a pencil trim, even bullnose. If there was a bullnose tile that you can use, that would be more forgiving. But you know, the schluter edging is probably the most economic way, and it's going to look pretty slick once we get it, once it's all put together. So we'll stop here for today, and then tomorrow we'll do the sidewalls here. Just take a scrubby pad. And this little tool, again, is going to be really helpful. Just be careful with this because this is ceramic and it not going to take much to chip it when you're doing this. So just be delicate. You just have to get the thin set, you know, behind the grout line. You don't need to get it all the way out of there. It just needs to be like a 1/16 inch behind the tile. I just get a grout cleaner, basically just a tile cleaner, and just scrub everything down just to make sure I get everything off of there. It just makes it easier if you do it at this stage. All right, so this is really less than ideal, and I really don't like the idea of having to do this, but this is a remodel project, and the old tub that we removed had some kind of weird skirt that kind of bumped out irregularly. So when I put a new tub in, you know, I got a really ugly gap here, probably about 1 inch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use a piece of tile, and I'm just gonna basically create a border right up against the tub. So I'm gonna cut out this existing tile, and well, first I got to take the baseboard off to be able to do that. But I'm basically just going to be cutting the existing tile and putting a little border piece up against the tub. This is just going to save me from having to replace the entire floor, and really that wasn't the idea. Again, this is just a remodel project. I mean, if it was my bathroom, I would not want fake tile like this particle board tile. But again, we're saving money. We're just doing the tub. So this is the things that you have to be able to take concession on if you're not going to spend thousands more dollars in redoing everything. So let's get this baseboard out of here. Hopefully I can reuse this. I don't know if I will or not, but We're just gonna butt this straight up to the tub, and we're just gonna make a mark on the tile. There, so that's nice and straight. Okay, so what we're gonna use is a Montolet CGX blade. So this is a good porcelain blade. Now I would have loved to use the one with my dust extractor on it, but I need to see this line to be able to cut this nicely. So I'm just gonna be freehanding it. So I don't recommend this, but I took the guard off of my grinder because I need to get this last little 3/4 inch piece cut to the tile. I don't want to, clip that and screw that up. So taking the guard off will allow me to go into the baseboard and into the wall a little bit to cut this. Tell you what, this little quick device right here really makes it nice. If you ever had those regular type of connectors, it's a real pain in the neck. This thing is awesome. It's like 20 bucks or something like that, but it allows you to change these blades really easily. That works pretty well. I'd normally have blisters on my hands when I'm trying to scrape something out like that. So that's a pretty cool tool. I wish I would have had this years ago. But yeah, scraping up the Dietrich, scraping up some of that thin set. Now I'll be able to get a good bond and fill that piece in. So there's no doubt having a professional saw makes a world of difference. And as you see at the end there, so that you can avoid chipping these little corners like the other tabletop, it's really, you had to be very, very slow and allow the blade to cut. This, you're able to plunge cut and be able to avoid that from happening. So there's no question, there's a reason that these tools are a lot more expensive, but honestly not necessary. It just takes a little bit more time on the other saws. Okay, so ideally, it'd be nice to have to be able to keep the floor waterproof, but I already put a saw blade right through the waterproofing, so this is just going to be a repair, and we're just going to thin set it just like anything else. Ideally, I'd really like to have all my bathrooms completely waterproof, but in order to do that, I would have had to, basically tear out the entire floor to be able to do this. But this will be just like 99% of other bathrooms where, a lot of people just used hardy backer or even plywood and just went right over it. So there's no problem there overall. So it's by no means a perfect scenario, but I think it'll look all right. Once we grout it, match everything up, it'll almost look like you kind of did it on purpose. Okay, so for the edging of this tile, we're just going with the jolly. So this is just like the flat kind of edging. And the main reason I did that was because I wanted to just meet up with this existing crappy particle tile stuff here. So I'm just gonna basically set this into place right up against her. Let me just clean out a little bit of this here. This is all outside the shower, so I know that it's not waterproof on this section in any fashion, but it really is basically out of the shower. So I think I'm just gonna thin set that right there, and then we'll be able to caulk this paneling to this. This is totally against everything I stand for, but I mean, at least it's at least a way to get the tub surround finished there. Okay, so on the side wall here, you know, really it's best just to keep it simple. So what I like to do on tub surrounds, especially with these 12 by 24s, is start out with a full tile, not at the base obviously, but just a full tile up against the rond deck or against your metal edging, and then have a half tile. So this really use that's like a 6.5 inch piece. So what I would recommend is offsetting the smaller piece off the big piece so it looks like a full piece that folds into the corner. So we can just start out with one full piece here and then work our way up. But if you cut this in half right here, it looks symmetrical and it looks right. And since this is like a 17-inch piece, that extra 6-inch piece makes it look like the full tile. So it really makes it simple with 12 by 24s. This is basically 30.5 inches, so it really depends on how far out your tile is going to come. But even if it was 36 inches, it still works great. And it really reduces the amount of cuts because now I can have my factory edge right up against my edging, and then I just have one piece to cut every other row that I have to be very delicate and concerned about. Because it's always the metal edging, or even if you're meeting up with bullnose, cutting that tile is always the most sensitive. The corners, you have a lot of wiggle room because you know you're going to be caulking that joint anyways and you're not going to see it, but the visual part is the metal edging. So all right, so now we have our laser here. We're lined up with our existing side over here. So now it's just a matter of cutting this first piece that's going to wrap around the edge of the tub. So this is going to be, again, probably one of the most difficult cuts. It's not really tremendously terrible, but if you got around the window yesterday, you're going to be fine on this one. Let me cut some of this stuff out of here. 7 1/8, 7 1/4. We'll go 7 1/8 on this side because you can leave an 1/8 inch against that bottom, and then this guy is going to go right down alongside the tub. And we're probably gonna have to scribe cut because I could even see right here there's like a little bit of a divot up, but we'll just make this 7 1/8 as well. We'll make this as a complete straight cut, and if we have to scribe cut to meet the tub, fine, we will. But you know, important part here is making sure that you kind of make this round. You don't want to make it square at this edge or you're going to have kind of an ugly little corner. You're going to want to round it. So let's go ahead and bring this outside. Just remember that we're going to kind of concave that part. So we're not going to go much past that so that we can curve that section. Jesus, why the hell is that so far down? What the hell happened there? Well, that's way off. The hell? Well, let's just try at least use this as a template. That looks pretty good that way. Just need to scribe cut this a little bit to move it over. Okay, so now we just need to get a little piece here. So we got 6 3/4. And we gotta cut 2 sides. And then both of them kind of have to be kind of nice. And just to show you how much easier this is, this really makes it a lot easier for glass. That's a much easier way to do it. That's why you pay the big bucks for it. Okay, so same concept on this side. So we got this lined up. Basically got the whole concept now, just a matter of, now you just have a couple holes you gotta cut that are gonna make it a little bit more challenging, but not too bad. So 7 1/4, and we'll mark kind of where our hole is. This guy going across the tub is 1 5/8. So this is what we're gonna be cutting. And in the center of our spout is 2 7/8. 2 7/8 off of this. I personally like the ones that go on the grinders. So this is like a 1-inch hole. And then, but you can obviously just get a regular standard one that you put in a drill. This just has more control, if you ask me. It's a drill a hole first in a piece of scrap. Okay, and now you can really see your center. Okay. Laser's pretty good. This fits nicely here. I can live with all of that. $18 5/8. Well, really a 5-inch hole. 6 1/4. 5-inch hole saw. But if you find anything that's 5 inches, this will work. So that's what we need to cut out right in the middle of that tile. There's many ways to go about doing this, but with ceramic, it's pretty easy to kind of grind your way through. So this guy here, just like a grinder, has diamonds all the way around it. And so you can just basically grind into this and get it all the way down. Now, I mean, a 4.5-inch grinder, it is difficult to go all the way around. You can also use a smaller bit, but you can use a 3 3/8-inch bit that would work for this. But this works pretty well, so it's just a matter of, let me get a sponge. So you're essentially just grinding through it. Okay, so that should work. No, it's not the prettiest thing, but I tell you what, I mean, you could get a hole saw for just this cut, but that's kind of expensive just for one hole. I mean, if you're a contractor and doing this all the time, it makes total sense. But this blade you can use for multiple different things. You can be grinding down the back of the tile if you have to overcome something. It's also a cutter. Now this is really worn down. I've probably used this for the last 10 jobs, and so it will work better when you buy a new one. But these ones are only like 25 bucks, really not that expensive. Okay, so before you completely commit to this, I mean, that's not bad. I'm a little overcut on the right side of this, but the important thing is that you have an escutcheon plate that's going to cover. So make sure you have that on hand. This has plenty of coverage, and the big thing here is just making sure that this rubber seal is on the tile itself. So in this instance, even though I'm overcut here about a 1/4 inch, it's not a big deal. So you do have some wiggle room with it. And that's again why I like using the grinder. It's just cheaper all the way around, and you know, that blade you can use for all types of different things. So okay, so we're 6 1/4, 6 5/8. That's like exactly what the other one was. All right, so that's all the tile. Little saw did the job. Pretty happy with it. All I gotta do is around these windows, grout, and we'll be done. All right, so the window, pretty easy at this point. It's just a matter of getting it into this space. So you can just basically work the thinset into the substrate here, and then basically just apply enough thinset to be able to line up your rond deck. So obviously just make sure that's pitching towards the shower. So if you don't want to struggle with actually grouting, especially if you're using a premix, I recommend using some kind of a grout release. This is really going to make a difference in eliminating haze from coming back. It's really important on a lot of these premix type of grouts. With this tile, this is like a cheap ceramic tile that has kind of a high gloss to it. And believe it or not, that can actually be a little bit porous and make it tough to remove any of the excess grout. So if you put this on a half hour beforehand, it'll help eliminate any of those porous cavities from sucking in the grout and making it difficult to remove. And with the high gloss towel, it's always, you know, when I take the cardboard out of my window, you'll be able to see the light come in and you'll be able to see different areas if there's grout haze left over. So this is going to make a tremendous difference. So all you got to do is literally just roll it on, let it sit there for a half an hour, and then you can go ahead and grout. And I've learned that this is just an extra step that is worth taking. There's nothing more frustrating than having a haze that you can't get off the tile, or having to get haze remover to actually remove it. And this will definitely prevent a lot of that headache. Anything that can make it a little bit easier on the grouting aspect is worth it. So I'm just I'm not worried about the glass. The glass is definitely not going to be something that you're going to get anything stuck to. It's just the main tile here. Let that sit about half an hour, and we can go ahead and grout everything. Okay, so while we're letting the grout release to dry, we're going to use some siliconized latex caulk to caulk the ceiling and the edges of our trim so that we can paint this room. So I really highly advise something like this, because this will have the elasticity to the expansion and contraction between the ceiling, and then we can also paint it the same color as the ceiling. So I always like to paint that joint, caulk it with this, because it's really hard to make the grout look good up against the ceiling. And if you're doing like a flat white ceiling paint like most people want, you know, you won't be able to even tell the difference. So we'll go ahead and caulk this whole joint. Or with some Windex, it'll help prevent that from smearing. All right, so we're gonna do one of my favorite grouts. I think this is a really DIY friendly type of grout. It's gonna be probably the quickest thing. So this is gonna be a quick video just going over the tips on how to use this and, you know, be able to get a good grout job so you can move on with the project. So this is a pre-mix grout. So there's absolutely nothing you have to do to, you don't have to do any mixing at all. It's already pre-mixed. Just a couple of things that you really wanna have on hand. Number one is a good grout float. This one's made by Trox. I really love these type of grout floats. It has kind of a rubbery consistency to it that really allows you to embed this into the grout joints. Another thing that you want to have is a couple of these. This is a really good sponge, ARDEX sponges. This is primarily all that I use, but being square allows you to grout and get everything nice and flush with the grout joint or with the tile. Most of the time that's what you're looking for, is just basically a flush joint against the tile. These are all rectified tiles, so they're going to be filling them. The square edges are going to make it easier to clean everything. And then the final couple of things is just some Windex with vinegar and microfiber cloths. This is going to help eliminate some of the haze. Now, a half hour prior to this, we had already used a grout release over top of this. I always recommend grout release over any tile that you're questioning whether you're going to have a hard time getting it off or not. This ceramic tile has kind of a high sheen to it. It's not exactly a very expensive tile, and I didn't want to have any issues with having any grout haze. Most of the time, when you take out the, especially when you have a window and you have daylight coming in, you can see areas where the haze just didn't remove off the tile. So if you do some grout release on this, it'll help prevent having any of that sticking on there. But really, it's a really simple process, and you're only spreading what you can do and that you can actually wipe off within 5 minutes. So I'll probably just do this whole wall and wipe it off. And the first thing you want to do is just take your damp sponge and just wipe down the area that you're actually going to be applying the grout to. And you don't want to be having a dripping sponge. I mean, water is going to be the worst enemy for this type of grout. So you really have to be delicate. You don't want any water just running off of the tile in any way. So, and then it's just a matter of taking the grout and pushing it into the grout joints. And you don't have to be too overly concerned about how much is left on the tile. But obviously, if you scrape it off at a 45-degree angle, that helps out a lot to get the excess off of the tile. And this stuff can go down to 16th inch wide grout joints. So it's kind of, what I really like about this premix is not only just the ease of use, but the fact that it's a really fine aggregate. So it's almost kind of like a non-sanded grout. And I always find that having a grout that has a really fine consistency is going to have a better chance of keeping it clean. You know, like anything that's real gritty can be tough to clean. Pay attention to making sure those joints are completely filled. Okay, then the next area that you're going to do, just wipe it down with the damp sponge. Okay, so then 5 minutes later, just basically circular motions and wipe it off. And again, the biggest thing about removing this is having just a damp sponge. You don't want to have too much water on it or it'll wash out the joint. And if it washes out the joint, you just have to wait a couple minutes and then refill. Just make sure that you fill in all the areas. And you really want to kind of eliminate the amount of times that you go over a joint, because that's just going to be more likely that you'll end up washing out the joint. This really helps with the haze. Is just take a microfiber cloth and wipe off the excess water, because that water will kind of form some haze spots, especially on the glass. But this grout, this is pretty high gloss tile, so you need to really just wipe off that water. If you see any thinset, make sure you scrape that out and fill those areas. Okay, so same process, just wipe down the tile that you're going to actually grout.
grout.
Yeah, it really kind of is. I mean, you know, you just get immediate results too. Like I can just immediately, you know, kind of get the end look that I know it's gonna, what it's pretty much gonna be. When we have a final wash, you know, an hour later, and I'll do with that Windex just to make sure there's no haze. But you know, the other thing is that it's very forgiving. Like if one of these joints did wash out, or I, you know, end up finding some thinset that I didn't get out of the joint, I can do that the next day, and it's not going to be a big deal. You just add a little bit more and you're done, you know. So it really is user friendly. And this stuff actually, like you know, a whole bucket for this little bit of tile work, kind of, you have way more than you need. So like something like this, you can do all of the floor and the walls, but this is actually left over from another job. So I'm able to reuse this on multiple jobs, because this really isn't taking that much grout at all. I mean, but you can like basically use this up to a year later. So even if it's like months down the road and your client calls and says, hey, I find a little area of my grout's missing, you can just touch it up, no big deal. The only thing that I don't use this is for like white grout. If they wanted white grout for this, I'd still go with the epoxy. I still think that's the best stain resistant type of grout. But being gray, you know, this is not going to be a problem at all for staining issues. And these are such small joints too. I mean, it's going to be a very easy shower to take care of. Okay, so then you definitely want to be caulking against the window. So we're leaving all the grout out of the corners to the vinyl window. We'll be caulking that after this dries. That makes a nice clean look. So we'll let this sit for about an hour and then wipe it down with the Windex, make sure there isn't any haze on it. But yeah, very simple process. Just a matter of really not having too much water on your sponge. That's the most important thing. If you put too much water in, it just kind of wants to run things out. All right, so about an hour, hour and a half later, just make sure all the joints are hard. And you can just use some of this Windex and get a little scrubby pad, scrub everything down and wipe it down. And that'll really get any of the rest of the haze that you might see on there. So just scrape it off or scrub everything. Okay, so just look at different angles of light, make sure you don't see anything. That really should get all that excess hazing off of there. And you can always just keep scrubbing it with more of the scrubby pad. So now we can go ahead and caulk and finish it off. So I always like to caulk the corners, especially on an outside wall. That'll be, and then obviously the tub as well, because the tub is acrylic, so it's gonna expand and contract a little bit, so you need to have a flexible joint right at that seam. But you want to make sure everything's dry before you do any caulking, so let this dry. Maybe put a fan on it, because any bit of water is just going to make that joint harder to make nice. Okay, so caulking. This can be a little bit painful sometimes, but again, make sure everything's dry, and then just try to find your widest joint and cut the tip to that. I usually just start out with like 3/16 of an inch, 1/4 inch, because you don't want to apply too much, but you just need to fill the entire corner. We'll take this anvil caulking tool. It's kind of got a wider, rounder one and a more sharp corner. These are pretty tight corners, so you just go with a tighter joint. Spray it down with Windex, and then apply full pressure on that joint. Up against the window. All right, so it's a good idea to fill up your tub before you caulk the main joint between the tub and the tile. Main reason is because this is acrylic tub and it does flex a little bit. So when you fill it up with water, all that weight will actually compress it a little bit. And if you caulked it before you filled it up, it could potentially, stretch that joint and make it not as good. So if you have it filled and then you fill the joint, the most it's going to do is raise up when you let the water out, and then that joint will be nice and compressed. But as you can see here, I have everything cleaned out all the way around my joint here. That's one important thing. Anything, the joint will last longer if you take all of the grout and thinset out of this joint, because then it'll have something to actually go into and make a stronger joint. So make sure you take the time to clean it out. And if you're recaulking a tub, same thing. You really want to try to get all of this out of there prior to caulking. And to make sure that everything's dry. And you go ahead and spray this joint all across. Take your caulking tool, apply full pressure. You're just kind of going over it, making sure that it's smooth. right against the tub.